The silence of the limousine was louder than any music. It vibrated in my ears, a dull, throbbing sound that had nothing to do with the engine and everything to do with the knot in my stomach. I looked out the tinted window at the familiar suburbs of Atlanta, the neat lawns and manicured hedges, and it all felt alien. It was the day of my son's wedding, and I was on my way to the venue, a luxurious estate just outside the city. My son, David, my only child. I adjusted the collar of my tuxedo, a garment that felt more like a straitjacket than a piece of celebratory clothing. My wife, Sarah, sat beside me, her hand resting on mine. "It's going to be okay, Richard," she whispered, but her eyes held the same worry that mirrored my own. She knew. She had seen the distance growing between David and me over the past 5 years, a chasm that started as a small crack and had now become a canyon we couldn't seem to cross. It began subtly, with missed phone calls and shorter conversations. Then came the infrequent visits. He was a busy man, a successful software engineer in a high-pressure job in San Francisco. I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up. They find their own lives. But I knew it was more than that. The distance wasn't just geographical, it was emotional. The cause? A mistake I made. A big one. 5 years ago, my company, a small but reputable construction firm I'd built from the ground up, was facing financial difficulties. I had a deal on the table, a risky but potentially lucrative project that could save us. I needed a significant investment, and David, with his tech industry salary and savvy investments, had the capital. He offered to help, but on one condition. He wanted a detailed business plan, a guarantee that the project was sound. I, in my arrogance and desperation, brushed off his concerns. "I built this company with my bare hands, son," I'd said. "I don't need a kid telling me how to run it." He didn't say anything, just looked at me with an expression I'll never forget, a mix of disappointment and hurt. He gave me the money anyway, a substantial sum, out of what I now know was pure love and trust. But I lost it all. The project was a failure, a spectacular, crushing disaster. The company went under. I lost everything, including his trust. I never fully apologized. I never acknowledged the depth of my failure, the shame of having dragged him into my mess. I just tried to move on, hoping the passage of time would heal the wound I had inflicted. Now, as the limo pulled up to the grand stone gates of the venue, I felt the full weight of that unresolved conflict. The place was beautiful, a sprawling green landscape with a large white tent shimmering in the afternoon sun. People were milling about, dressed in their finest, all smiles and excitement. My heart hammered against my ribs. We were led to our seats in the front row, a prime spot that felt more like a spotlight. Relatives and friends greeted us, their polite congratulations mixed with curious glances. They didn't know the full story, but they sensed the tension. The air was thick with it. My brother Frank came over and clapped me on the back. "Looking good, Rich. It's a big day." He saw the worry in my eyes and his smile faltered. "Don't sweat it. He's your son. He loves you." I wanted to believe him. The ceremony was a blur of white lace, fragrant flowers, and soft music. David stood at the altar, looking handsome and impossibly grown up in his dark tuxedo. His fiancée, Emily, was stunning, her face radiating with happiness. As they exchanged vows, I felt a pang of profound sadness. My son was starting a new life, and I felt like a ghost, an observer from a distance. After the ceremony, the reception began. I watched as David and Emily mingled with guests, their joy infectious. Then came the photos. The photographer, a young woman with a calm demeanor, began organizing the family portraits. "Okay, let's get the bride's side of the family first," she announced. I saw Emily's parents and her siblings gather around the happy couple, smiling and laughing as the camera flashed. The sight was a punch to the gut. They were a family unit, whole and complete. When it was our turn, the photographer called out, "Groom's family." My brother Frank and his wife and children stepped forward. Then my sister Laura and her family. I saw David's grandmother, my mother, wheeled to the front, her face beaming with pride. One by one, every single member of my family, every aunt, uncle, and cousin took their turn with David. He hugged them, laughed with them, and posed for 100 different pictures. Each flash of the camera was a silent stab, and then it was over. The photographer looked at her list. "All right, that's everyone. Now let's get some shots of the wedding party." I stood there, a strange, hollow feeling in my chest. I had been forgotten, or worse, deliberately excluded. He hadn't looked at me once during the entire session, not a glance, not a single word. He had taken photos with everyone in our family, everyone except me. I excused myself from the table, muttering something about needing some air. I walked out of the tent and into the cool evening air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I leaned against a stone wall, my hands shoved deep into my pockets. The knot in my stomach was a fist now, clenching and unclenching with a pain that was both physical and emotional. This was it. This was the culmination of my failure. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the years of unspoken resentment, of my pride getting in the way of a simple apology. He didn't hate me, that was too simple. He was hurt, deeply hurt. And I had been too blind or too stubborn to see the full extent of the damage I had caused. A hand rested on my shoulder. It was Sarah. Her face was etched with concern. "Richard, are you okay?" I shook my head, my voice thick with emotion. "He didn't even look at me, Sarah. Not once." She pulled me into a hug, her warmth a small comfort against the cold dread I felt. "Give him time," she whispered, but I knew it wasn't about time anymore. This was a statement, a public one. He had made a choice, and his choice was to exclude me from the most important day of his life. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, a sensation I hadn't felt in years. I had always prided myself on my strength, my resilience. I was the man who built a business from nothing, the man who handled setbacks with stoicism. But in that moment, all that faded away. I was just a father, a man who had broken his son's trust, and now I was paying the price. Just as I was about to go back inside, defeated, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was David. He was holding a small brown paper bag, a look of uncertainty on his face. He walked slowly towards me, the sound of the party fading behind him. My heart pounded with a renewed, frantic hope. He wasn't going to just let me stand there, alone. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze meeting mine for the first time all day. There was no anger in his eyes, only a quiet sadness that mirrored my own. He held out the bag. "Dad," he said, his voice low and hesitant, "I brought you something." My mind raced. What could it be, an olive branch? A final, painful gesture? My hand trembled as I took the bag from him. Inside, I felt something hard, something rectangular. I pulled it out. It was an old photo album. Faded and worn, its cover was a deep burgundy color, the kind of cheap plastic material they sold at every corner store in the 90s. I looked up at him, confused. He gave a small, wry smile. "It's the album you made for me when I was a kid. You know, with all our old photos, all the ones before the company." My heart ached with a new kind of pain, a deep, nostalgic grief. This was a ghost from the past, a reminder of a time when our relationship was simple, when the world was black and white, and my only job was to be his dad. A time before the bitterness, before the resentment, before the shame. He hadn't forgotten. He remembered it all. And in that one gesture I saw the truth of his hurt, a hurt so profound it had to be a statement. He hadn't just excluded me from a photograph. He had excluded me from his life, and he had brought the evidence to show me why. He was asking me, without words, if I remembered who we used to be and if I could still find a way back to that person. But how? The chasm felt wider than ever. The weight of the photo album in my hands was heavier than its physical form. It was a dense, tangible summary of all my failings. I opened it carefully, the plastic cover cracking as I turned the first page. The smell of old paper and fading memories wafted up to me. The first photo was of a younger me, with a thick head of brown hair, holding a toddler David in my arms. We were at the park, and my face, captured in that moment, held a smile so pure and unburdened it was hard to recognize. David, a chubby-cheeked baby, was laughing, his tiny hand reaching for my nose. I flipped through the pages. Each one was a step back in time. There was a photo of me teaching him how to ride a bike, his face a mixture of terror and determination. Another of us at a Braves game, sharing a giant hot dog, our faces smeared with mustard. There were pictures from our summer trips to the lake, of building sandcastles that were inevitably washed away by the tide, of him holding up a fish he'd caught that was no bigger than his hand, his pride a beacon. The album was a record of all the moments I had cherished, all the memories I had somehow let slip away. It was a record of a relationship built on a foundation of trust and unconditional love. I looked up from the album, my eyes stinging. David was still standing there, his hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the distance. "I remember these," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I remember all of them." He nodded, a tight, controlled movement. "I know. I found it when I was packing up my old room. Mum kept it." The mention of Sarah brought a brief, painful flicker of light. She was the one who had held our family together, the glue I had so carelessly strained. "Why did you bring it out here?" I asked, my voice cracking. He hesitated, a long silence stretching between us. The sounds of the reception, the distant clinking of glasses, and the faint murmur of conversation seemed a million miles away. "Because I wanted you to see it," he said finally, his voice low and strained. "I wanted you to remember who we were. Before the business, before the mistake." He didn't use the word failure, but I heard it all the same. "David, I know I messed up. I'm so sorry. Sorry for what, Dad?" He cut me off, the words spilling out, a dam breaking after years of being held back. "Sorry for losing the money, or sorry for not trusting me, sorry for not listening. I didn't care about the money, Dad. I cared that you didn't trust me enough to show me your plan, that you were too proud to let your own son help you." His words hit me like a physical blow. He was right. It was never about the money. It was about my pride. My stubborn, foolish pride that had convinced me I had all the answers. I had built myself on the idea of being the strong, self-sufficient man who didn't need help, and in doing so, I had pushed away the very person who wanted to give it. "I was a fool," I said, the words heavy and real. "I was a fool, and I am so, so sorry." He looked at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was something more fragile, something that felt like a tiny, nascent hope. "I wanted to be there for you, Dad. I wanted to be your partner, not just your son. I wanted you to see me as an equal, a man with his own ideas, his own life. But you always saw me as the kid from these photos." He gestured to the album in my hand. "The kid you had to protect, the kid who didn't know anything." "That's not true," I protested, but even as I said the words, I knew they rang hollow. To a certain extent it was true. My identity as a father was so wrapped up in the idea of providing and protecting that I hadn't known how to transition into a new dynamic, one where my son was a man, a peer. The weight of my mistakes settled on my shoulders, a tangible burden. He was a grown man now, with a beautiful wife and a life of his own. He was a success in his own right, and he had every right to be resentful. "I don't know what to say," I admitted, my voice hoarse. "I've tried, but I don't know how to fix this." He took a step closer. The air between us was charged with a tense, uncertain energy. "The photos, they were a test, Dad, to see if you would notice, to see if you would care enough to say something." My heart sank. A test, and I had failed. I'd been so lost in my own pain and shame that I hadn't confronted him about it. I had simply retreated, confirming his deepest fear, that I was still the same man, too proud to face the music. "I noticed," I said, my voice catching. "I noticed every single one of them, and it hurt more than you can possibly imagine." "Then why didn't you say anything?" he asked, his voice filled with a desperate plea. "Why didn't you come to me? Why did you just walk away?" I had no answer. My pride, my cowardice, my fear of rejection, they had all conspired against me. "I was afraid," I confessed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I was afraid you would confirm my worst fears, that you didn't love me anymore, that you wouldn't forgive me." He looked at me for a long moment, 1,000 emotions playing out on his face. He reached out and gently took the photo album from my hand. He held it for a moment, his fingers tracing the worn edges. "I will always love you, Dad. That's the part you don't understand. I just need you to see me for who I am now, not who I was in these pictures. I'm not that kid anymore." He turned and walked away, the photo album clutched in his hand. He didn't look back. I stood there, watching him disappear into the crowd, the finality of his words echoing in the silence. The weight was gone from my hands, but a new, heavier weight had settled in my heart. The photo album was a testament to our past, but the empty space it left behind was a stark reminder of our present. The test was over, and I had failed. The reconciliation I had so desperately hoped for was further away than ever. I had to find a new way to reach him, a new path forward, or risk losing him forever. The rest of the wedding was a blur. I went through the motions, forcing a smile, making polite conversation, all while a storm raged inside me. Sarah, ever the perceptive one, saw my pain. She held my hand under the table, a silent comfort. I couldn't bring myself to tell her what had happened, not fully. The shame was too great. I had failed to connect with my son on his most important day, and in doing so, I had proven every one of his doubts about me. The drive home was quiet. Sarah didn't press me, for which I was grateful. She knew me well enough to know that when I was ready to talk, I would. We got back to our house, a quiet suburban home that once felt full of life, but now seemed to echo with emptiness. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one I had sat in for so many years, reading to David when he was a boy, and the silence was deafening. The next morning I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just let things be. I couldn't just wait for time to heal the wound. I had to be proactive. I had to go to him, not to argue, not to explain, but to apologize. A real, honest, no excuses apology. I found Sarah in the kitchen, sipping her coffee. "I'm going to San Francisco," I said without preamble. She put her mug down, her eyes widening. "Richard, why? David just got married. He's on his honeymoon." "He's not on his honeymoon yet," I corrected her. "They're leaving in a few days. I'm not going to see them. I'm going to see Emily's parents. I need to get Emily's number from them, and then I need to go to him. I need to talk to him." Sarah's expression softened. "Richard, are you sure this is the right time? He just had a very emotional day." "I'm sure," I said, a sense of grim determination setting in. "There is no right time. There's just now. If I wait, I'll lose my nerve. I'll make another excuse. I'll convince myself that it's better to let things lie. I can't do that anymore, Sarah. I can't live with this regret." She came over and wrapped her arms around me. "I know. Just be careful. He's not the same boy anymore. He's a man. And he's been hurt." "I know," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I know." I booked the next flight out to San Francisco. The journey was long, and the plane ride was filled with the kind of nervous energy that only comes from a mixture of hope and fear. I wasn't just flying across the country. I was flying into the unknown, into the heart of a conflict I had allowed to fester for far too long. When I arrived in San Francisco, I felt a strange sense of displacement. The city was a whirlwind of activity, a stark contrast to the quiet, familiar suburbs of Atlanta. I took a cab to the address Emily's parents had given me. They were a lovely couple, kind and understanding. I explained my predicament, my voice low and filled with shame. They listened patiently, their faces filled with empathy. They had seen the tension at the wedding, the unspoken hurt. They gave me David's address and his number, their expressions full of quiet encouragement. The next day, I took a cab to David's apartment. It was a modern high-rise in a bustling, vibrant neighborhood. The building was sleek and full of glass, a far cry from the cozy brick houses I was used to. I took a deep breath, the cold San Francisco air stinging my lungs, and pressed the buzzer. After a moment, David's voice, a little groggy, came through the speaker. "Hello? It's me, son," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm here." A long silence. I held my breath, waiting. I half expected him to tell me to go away, to tell me he didn't want to see me. But then the buzzer sounded, a sharp, buzzing noise that felt like a release. "Come on up," he said, his voice flat, emotionless. I took the elevator up, my heart pounding in my ears. The doors opened to a sleek, modern hallway. His apartment door was open, and he was standing there, his face a mask of weary resignation. He hadn't shaved, and his hair was unkempt. He was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, a stark contrast to the sharp tuxedo he had worn just days before. He looked tired. "Dad, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice devoid of anger, but filled with a quiet, devastating sadness. I stepped inside, the door closing with a soft click behind me. "I came to apologize," I said, the words tumbling out. "I came to say that I'm sorry. Not just about the money, David. I'm sorry for everything. For not listening to you. For not trusting you. For not seeing you for the man you've become." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "It's a little late for that, isn't it?" he said, his voice quiet. "You had a whole day, a whole wedding to talk to me. But you didn't. You just walked away." "I was afraid," I admitted, the old excuse tasting just as bitter as it had the night before. "I was afraid of what you would say. I was afraid of the look on your face. I was afraid I had lost you forever." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't understand, Dad. I didn't want the money. I wanted to help you. I wanted to be a part of your life. But you always pushed me away. You always acted like you had it all figured out." "I was arrogant," I confessed. "I was a failure. My whole life I had prided myself on my business, on my self-made success. And when it all fell apart, I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to admit that I was wrong. I was too ashamed." He looked at me for a long time, the silence stretching between us. I stood there, a middle-aged man who had built and lost a company, who had alienated his own son, who was now standing in a modern apartment, begging for forgiveness. The tables had turned. I was no longer the provider, the protector. I was the one who needed help. "I don't know what to say, Dad," he said finally, his voice soft. "I'm glad you came, but I don't know if I can just forget. It's been a long time. The hurt runs deep." "I know," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you for a chance to be the father you deserve, to be the man I should have been all along. I'm here. I'm not leaving until we talk. I have nothing but time." He looked at me, a flicker of something new in his eyes. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a grudging, reluctant willingness to listen. He gestured to the couch. "Okay," he said. "Sit down. We have a lot to talk about." I sank into the soft cushions, the journey, the worry, the fear all catching up to me. The city hummed outside the window, a world of possibility and noise. But in that room, it was just the two of us, a father and a son, finally ready to face the ghosts of the past. It was a small victory, but it was a start. And for a man who had been adrift for years, it felt like the first breath of clean, fresh air. The conversation that followed was one of the hardest of my life. David began by telling me, in excruciating detail, how he had felt over the past 5 years. He spoke of the phone calls I had cut short, the times he had offered to visit and I had vaguely put him off, the birthday I had forgotten, the holidays I had spent with work colleagues rather than with him and Sarah. He spoke without anger, his voice low and steady, as if he were simply listing facts. But each fact was a hammer blow to my heart. He told me about the fear he had felt when the news of my company's bankruptcy broke. He wasn't afraid for the money he had invested. He was afraid for me. He had called me that day, his voice filled with concern, and I had been cold, distant, and had insisted I didn't need his help. I had told him to focus on his own life, his own career, effectively shutting him out. I had been too proud to admit my failure, and in doing so I had confirmed his worst suspicions, that I would always put my pride before him. I sat there and listened, my head in my hands, a profound sense of shame washing over me. I wanted to interrupt, to make excuses, to explain myself. But I knew I couldn't. This was not about me. This was about him. This was my time to listen, to finally hear the words he had been unable to say for so long. "I just wanted to be there for you, Dad," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I saw what was happening, the stress, the long hours. I just wanted to help you. I wanted to be your friend, your confidant. I didn't want to be just your son." "I know," I said, my voice hoarse. "I understand that now. I didn't know how to be vulnerable. I had always been the strong one, the one who had all the answers. I didn't know how to ask for help, even from my own son. And I'm sorry." He was quiet for a long moment, a silence that felt different from the one that had filled our lives for the past 5 years. This one was full of potential, of unspoken forgiveness. "I told Emily about all of it," he said finally. "The money, the company, everything. She's the one who suggested I bring the album to the wedding. She told me to show you, to remind you of what we were, and to see if you would notice the change. The fact that I was no longer that boy, and that you had to change too." A wave of emotion hit me. Emily. The beautiful, kind woman who had become his wife, who had seen the depth of his pain and had found a way to bridge the gap. She was the one who had orchestrated the silent test, the one who had given him the courage to confront me without words. She was an angel. "She's a good woman, David," I said, my voice choked. "She's a very, very good woman." He gave a small, weary smile. "She is. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. She's the one who made me realize I couldn't just keep waiting for you to change. I had to do something myself." "And you did," I said, looking him in the eye. "And you were right. You were right about everything." The weight of my admission seemed to hang in the air between us. It was a watershed moment, a turning point. For the first time, I was not just a man trying to explain himself. I was a man admitting his failure, his flaws, and his profound regret. We talked for hours, the sun setting outside the window, painting the city in a soft, golden glow. We talked about the old memories, the ones in the photo album, and the new ones we had missed. He told me about his work, about the projects he was passionate about, the friends he had made. I told him about my life after the company went under, about the small part-time consulting work I had found, and the quiet satisfaction of a simpler life. I had to admit, there was a sense of peace I had never known when I was constantly chasing the next big deal. He listened, really listened for the first time in years, and in his listening I felt a tentative bridge being built, a fragile connection reforming. It was slow and it was hard, but it was happening. "I still don't know how to fix this, David," I admitted as the room grew dark. "I can't undo the past. I can't give you back the 5 years we lost." "You can't," he said, his voice gentle, "but you can start now. You can start by calling me, by asking how my day was, by listening, by not being afraid to tell me when you're struggling, by letting me in." His words were a roadmap, a simple, clear set of instructions. It wasn't about a grand gesture. It was about the small daily acts of connection that I had so carelessly abandoned. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the tension that had once been a constant presence now replaced by a quiet, fragile peace. "So, what do you want to do now?" he asked, a small, tentative smile on his face. "I want to take you out to dinner," I said, a smile breaking through my own fatigue. "I want to hear about your honeymoon plans. I want to meet your wife as a father, not just a guest at her wedding." He nodded, a flicker of genuine warmth in his eyes. "Okay," he said, "but you're buying." I laughed, a real full-throated laugh that felt like a release. "You bet I am." The sound of my own laughter after so many years of bottled-up pain was a melody of hope. It was a sign that the ghost in the machine of our relationship was gone, replaced by the living, breathing presence of a father and his son, finally, truly, ready to reconnect. The journey had been long and painful, but in that moment, in that quiet apartment in a city thousands of miles from home, I knew it had been worth it. The photo album had been a reminder of a past that was lost, but our conversation was a promise of a future that was just beginning to unfold. The dinner that followed was nothing short of a miracle. We went to a small Italian restaurant a few blocks from his apartment. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the strained formality of the wedding reception. Emily joined us, her face lighting up when she saw me. She hugged me, a genuine, empathetic hug that made my heart swell. "I'm so glad you're here, Richard," she said, her voice filled with genuine warmth. "I know how much this means to David." Her words were a balm to my soul. I thanked her for her kindness, for her wisdom in giving David the idea of the photo album. She just smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "He's a good man," she said, looking at David. "He just needed a little push." Over plates of pasta and glasses of red wine, we talked. It wasn't the heavy, soul-bearing conversation of the afternoon. This was a normal, easy conversation. We talked about their honeymoon plans to Italy, about the ridiculousness of wedding planning, about Emily's job as a graphic designer. I found myself listening, truly listening, to the details of their lives. I asked questions, not out of a sense of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity. I learned that David had been offered a promotion at work, a big step up that he was excited about. I learned that he and Emily were looking at houses, a small home with a backyard where they could one day start a family. I learned about their dreams, their hopes, their fears. It was a conversation I had been longing to have for years, but had been too proud to initiate. I found myself telling them about my life as well. I talked about the small joys of my quiet retirement, the simple pleasure of working in my garden, the weekly poker game with my old friends. I had spent so long defining myself by my career, by the size of my company, that I had forgotten to find meaning in the small, everyday things. Now, with the weight of my past lifted, I could see them clearly for the first time. After dinner, we walked back to their apartment. The San Francisco streets were alive with people, the city lights a beautiful, shimmering spectacle. David walked beside me, his arm around Emily's waist. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to me. It was a sign of a new beginning, a silent acknowledgement that the space between us was no longer empty. When we reached their building, he turned to me. "Dad," he said, his voice soft, "thank you for coming. It means a lot." "It means everything to me, son," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He pulled me into a hug, a real bone-crushing hug. It wasn't a tentative embrace, it was the hug of a man who had finally found his way back to his father. I held him tight, the years of pain, of regret, of sadness all melting away. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I had feared might never come. I hugged Emily as well, and told her once again how grateful I was. She just smiled, her eyes filled with happy tears. "Call us when you get home," she said. I nodded, my own eyes welling up. "I will. Every day." I took a cab back to my hotel, my heart soaring. The pain was still there, the memory of the past, but it was no longer a wound. It was a scar, a reminder of a journey, of a lesson learned. I had gone to San Francisco, a broken man, a failure, a ghost in my son's life. I was leaving as a father, a man who had finally found the courage to apologize, to be vulnerable and to start over. The next day, I flew back to Atlanta. Sarah was waiting for me at the airport. I didn't have to say a word. The look on my face told her everything. She hugged me tight, a deep, silent embrace that spoke volumes. Over the next few weeks, things changed. I started calling David, not just to talk about work or money, but to talk about his day. He would call me too. We started a new ritual, a weekly video call where we would just talk. I showed him the progress of my garden, and he would show me the latest tech gadget he was working on. The conversations were easy, filled with laughter and a newfound sense of camaraderie. One evening he called me, his voice filled with excitement. "Dad, I need your help with something." My heart pounded. Was this it? Was he finally ready to trust me again? "What is it, son?" "Emily and I are buying a house," he said. "It needs a lot of work. The previous owner didn't take care of it very well. It's an old house, and I don't know the first thing about renovations. I was hoping you could come and help us." My mind raced. A house, renovations, my old life. This was the perfect opportunity, a chance to show him, not with words but with actions, that I was a changed man, that my knowledge, my skills, my presence could be a source of strength, not a source of pain. "I'd love to," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I would love to help you." "Great," he said, a genuine smile in his voice. "We'll send you the plans. It's a bit of a fixer-upper, but I think with your help, we can make it a home." The words "with your help" resonated deep within me. He was finally seeing me as a partner, not as a source of disappointment. He was inviting me back into his life, not as a ghost, but as a living, breathing, vital part of it. The journey of 1,000 miles had begun with a single, fragile photo album. But it was in that moment, on that simple phone call, that I knew the long road to reconciliation was finally over, and a new road, a road to a new and stronger relationship, was just beginning. A week later, a thick packet of blueprints and photos arrived in the mail. I spread them out on the kitchen table, a wave of familiar excitement washing over me. The house was an old Victorian with peeling paint, a sagging porch, and a yard full of overgrown weeds. It was, as David had said, a true fixer-upper, but I saw something more. I saw potential. I saw the ghost of a beautiful home waiting to be brought back to life. I spent the next few days poring over the plans, making notes and sketching out ideas. I called David, and we spent hours on the phone discussing everything from the structural integrity of the foundation to the best type of wood for the new porch. He listened to my ideas, asked insightful questions, and even challenged some of my assumptions, a dynamic that felt both new and profoundly satisfying. It wasn't the father-son relationship of old, built on a hierarchy of knowledge and authority. It was a collaboration, a partnership. The day I flew back to San Francisco, I felt a familiar nervous energy, but this time it was mixed with a powerful sense of purpose. David and Emily met me at the airport. Their faces were full of genuine excitement. There was no more tension, no more unspoken resentment, just a happy, welcoming family. They drove me to the house, and as I stepped out of the car, I felt a sense of coming home. The house was a mess, but it was their mess, a blank canvas on which we would build their future. We spent the first few days simply assessing the damage, tearing down walls, and clearing out years of accumulated junk. It was backbreaking work, but it was also a form of therapy. Each nail I pulled, each layer of old wallpaper I stripped away, felt like I was tearing down a wall between us, stripping away a layer of old pain. During the days, we worked. David, with his strong engineer's hands, was a quick study. I taught him how to use a circular saw, how to measure twice and cut once, the proper way to lay tile. He listened, his focus intense, and he learned quickly. We fell into a natural rhythm, a comfortable silence punctuated by the sound of hammers and saws. In the evenings we would sit on the back porch, drinking beers and talking. We talked about his childhood, about the things I had forgotten, the memories that had been hidden under the weight of my shame. He told me about the time he had broken my favorite antique vase and had been too afraid to tell me, and I laughed, a genuine, joyful laugh. I told him about my own fears and insecurities as a young father, about my own father's distant nature, and my struggle to be better. We were finally peeling back the layers, revealing the messy, complicated but beautiful human beings underneath. One afternoon, we were taking a break, sitting on the dusty floor of what was to become their living room. David was sketching out a floor plan on a piece of scrap wood. "You know," he said, not looking up from his drawing, "the reason I went into software was because of you." I looked at him, surprised. "Me? But I'm a builder. I use my hands. I thought you would want to do something more tangible." He looked up, a small smile on his face. "I wanted to be like you, to build something from nothing. But I saw how hard it was for you, how much stress you were under. So I chose a different path, a cleaner path. A path where I could build a life for myself, a family, and not have to worry about the next big project, the next potential disaster." His words hit me like a revelation. I had always thought his choice was a rejection of my life, a silent condemnation of my failure. But it wasn't. It was a testament to his love, a desire to protect himself from the pain he had seen me endure. He had found his own way, his own path to success, and in doing so he had found a way to honor my legacy without repeating my mistakes. "I'm proud of you, son," I said, the words heavy with a new kind of meaning. "More proud than you will ever know." He nodded, a silent acknowledgement that the chasm between us was now gone, replaced by a bridge of understanding. As the weeks went on, the house began to transform. The sagging porch was replaced with a sturdy, beautiful new one. The peeling wallpaper was gone, replaced by a fresh coat of paint. The old broken windows were replaced with new, energy-efficient ones. And with each nail, each coat of paint, each new window, our relationship grew stronger. The house was not just a project. It was a symbol of our reconciliation, a physical representation of the foundation we were rebuilding. One evening, after a long day of work, we were standing in the empty living room. The space was bright and clean, filled with the promise of a future. David turned to me, his eyes shining. "Dad," he said, "I have to ask you something." My heart pounded. Was he finally going to tell me what had happened with the wedding photos? What had changed? "What is it, son? Will you two move in with us?" I stared at him, my mouth agape. "What?" "Not permanently," he said, a small nervous laugh escaping his lips. "I mean, we'll build a small guest house in the back, but we want you to be here. We want you to be a part of our lives. We need you here." I couldn't speak. The weight of his words, the profound generosity of his offer, was overwhelming. My son, the man I had pushed away, the man who had publicly excluded me from his wedding photos, was now asking me to move in with him. He was asking me to be a part of his new life, a vital, essential part. "David," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "I don't know what to say." "Just say yes," he said, a gentle smile on his face. "Please just say yes. We want you here." In that moment, standing in the bare bones of their future home, I knew the journey had come to an end. The past was no longer a burden, but a lesson. The chasm was gone, replaced by the warmth of a shared future. My son had not just forgiven me, he had welcomed me back home, and for a man who had felt so lost for so long, there was no greater gift. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. I called Sarah and told her about David's offer. She was speechless at first, and then, her voice full of a joy I hadn't heard in years, she started making plans. We began the process of packing up our lives in Atlanta, a life that had been so defined by my failure, and prepared for a new one, a life defined by reconciliation and new beginnings. The construction of the guest house became our new project. David took the lead on the design with my guidance, and we spent hours debating the merits of different layouts, materials, and colors. He was a natural, a man who had an innate understanding of structure and design, a legacy I realized that he had inherited from me. It was a beautiful, full-circle moment, a silent acknowledgement that he had not just chosen to be different from me, but had also chosen to take the best parts of me and make them his own. The physical labor was hard, but it was also profoundly satisfying. We worked side by side, our hands calloused and our clothes covered in dust, but our hearts were light. We talked about everything and nothing. We reminisced about our old summer trips, the time we went fishing and I fell into the lake, the time he built a go-kart that didn't have any brakes. Laughter, a sound that had been so absent from our relationship, became a constant presence. One afternoon, as we were hammering the frame of a new window, he stopped and looked at me. "Dad," he said, his voice quiet, "I need to tell you about the photos." My heart, which had been so light, ached with a familiar tension. "You don't have to," I said. "It's in the past." "No," he insisted. "You deserve to know. I didn't plan it. Not consciously, anyway. It just happened." He explained that when the photographer called for groom's family, he had looked up and seen my brother, my sister, my mother, and all our relatives. He had felt a sudden, profound sense of panic. He had been so hurt for so long, so used to the chasm between us, that he hadn't known how to stand beside me and smile for a picture, as if everything was okay. His pain had manifested as an unconscious act of self-preservation. He had simply gone through the motions, and in doing so he had confirmed my worst fears. "It wasn't a test, Dad," he said, his eyes filled with a new kind of pain. "It was a manifestation of my own hurt. And when I saw your face, when I saw you walk away, I knew I had made a mistake. I knew I had hurt you, and in doing so, I had hurt myself. That's when I went to get the photo album. I wanted to show you that I hadn't forgotten the man you used to be, the man I wanted you to be again, The man who had a place in my life. His words were a revelation. I had spent so long convinced that he had been deliberately cruel, that he had been testing me, that I hadn't considered the simplest explanation, that he was a human being, a man who had been hurt, who had acted out of pain, not out of malice. His confession was a gift, a final piece of the puzzle that had been missing for so long. "I understand," I said, and the words were honest and true. "I understand, son. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I put you in that position." He shook his head. "Don't be. It was the best thing that could have happened. It forced us to face the truth. It forced us to talk." We worked in silence for a few minutes, the sound of the hammers and the saws, a new kind of language. We were no longer two men trying to find a way back to each other. We were two men building a new life, a new home, a new foundation for a new relationship. One evening, after we had finished the framing of the guest house, we sat on the newly constructed deck, watching the sunset over the San Francisco Bay. The air was cool and crisp, and the sky was a canvas of purple, orange, and gold. "Do you remember the time you taught me how to fly a kite?" he asked, a small nostalgic smile on his face. I laughed. "How could I forget? You were so determined. The kite kept falling, but you refused to give up. I learned a lot from you back then, Dad," he said, his voice soft. "I learned how to be persistent, how to not give up. I learned how to build something from nothing. I wish I had told you that before." "You don't have to tell me anymore," I said, looking him in the eye. "You're showing me every day." He nodded, a silent acknowledgement that the chasm was no longer there. The bridge had been built, not with bricks and mortar, but with apologies, with honesty, with hard work, and with a shared understanding of a painful past. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a final golden glow on the guest house, I knew. The photographs at the wedding had been a testament to a broken relationship, but the guest house, the home we were building, was a testament to our healing. It was a tangible symbol of a new beginning, a new foundation, a new family. My son had taken a picture with everyone in the family except me, but now with his hands, with my hands, we were building a new picture, a new family photo, one frame at a time. And this time, I was in the center of the frame, right where I belonged. The guest house was completed just a few months later, a beautiful, cozy space with a view of the bay. Sarah and I moved in, and the new phase of our lives began. We were no longer just empty nesters in a quiet house. We were an integral part of our son's life, a part of his family. Life settled into a new, comfortable rhythm. My days were filled with simple, satisfying tasks. I worked in the garden, helping David and Emily with their landscaping. I went on long walks with Sarah along the bay, and in the evenings we would have dinner with David and Emily, sharing stories, laughing, and just enjoying each other's company. The relationship I had with David was no longer a fragile thing. It was strong and resilient, built on a foundation of honesty and trust. We still had our disagreements, our moments of frustration, but they were no longer a source of pain. They were simply a part of a normal, healthy relationship. We had learned to talk, to listen, and to apologize. One afternoon, I was in the backyard, working on a new rose garden, when David came out with a small bag. "Dad," he said, his voice a little shy, "I want to show you something." He held out the bag and I took it from him. Inside I felt something hard, something rectangular. My heart pounded with a familiar anticipation. I pulled it out. It was a framed photograph. I looked at it, and a lump formed in my throat. It was a picture of me and David. We were standing in front of the guest house, our clothes dusty and our faces tired, but filled with a profound sense of accomplishment. I was holding a hammer, and he was holding a paintbrush. We were both smiling, a real, genuine, unburdened smile. "I found the photographer from the wedding," he said, his voice soft. "I told her the whole story. She came out here a few weeks ago and took this picture. I wanted to give you a photo of us, Dad. A new one, a real one." I couldn't speak. The photograph was more than just a picture. It was a testament to our journey. It was a physical representation of the work we had done, the pain we had overcome, and the love that had brought us back together. The wedding photos had been a symbol of my exclusion. This photograph, was a symbol of my belonging. "Thank you, son," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. This means everything to me." "It means everything to me too," he said, his eyes shining. "I'm sorry it took me so long to give you this, to give you us." He hugged me, and this time the hug was not just an act of reconciliation. It was an act of love, of gratitude, of shared history. It was the hug of a son who had finally found his way back to his father, and a father who had finally found his way back home. Later that evening, as Sarah and I were getting ready for bed, I placed the framed photo on our bedside table. It was the first thing I would see when I woke up, and the last thing I would see before I went to sleep. It was a reminder of a journey, a lesson, and a profound love. The next morning I woke up to the sound of birds chirping and the smell of coffee. I looked at the photo, at our smiling faces, and I felt a profound sense of peace. The past was no longer a burden. It was a part of our story, a part of the journey that had brought us to this moment. I walked to the kitchen, and I saw David and Emily sitting at the counter, a pot of coffee brewing. "Morning, Dad," he said, a genuine smile on his face. "Morning, son," I said, my heart full. I poured myself a cup of coffee, and I joined them at the counter. We talked about the plans for the day, the weather, the news. It was a simple, ordinary moment, but it was also a perfect one. It was a moment of connection, of love, of family. It was a full picture of our lives, one that was no longer defined by absence, but by presence. And in that moment, in that quiet, sunlit kitchen, I knew that I had everything I had ever wanted and so much more. The journey was over, and the real life was just beginning. Life with David and Emily was everything I had ever hoped for and more. Sarah was in her element, helping Emily with the house, planning dinner parties, and just being a loving presence. I had my own routine, a mix of gardening, reading, and helping David with his side projects. Our relationship had settled into a comfortable, easy friendship, built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. One evening, as we were having a quiet dinner, Emily brought up the topic of their wedding. "You know, Richard," she said, her voice soft, "I was a little worried about the photo album idea. I didn't know if it would work or if it would just cause more pain." I looked at her, and I saw a woman of immense kindness and wisdom. "It was a brilliant idea," I said. "A very hard one, but a necessary one." "It wasn't just my idea," she said, looking at David. "David was the one who went along with it. He was the one who had the courage to confront his own pain, to take a chance on a new beginning." David looked at me, a serious expression on his face. "I had to, Dad. I couldn't live like that anymore. I couldn't get married and start a new life while still holding on to the bitterness of the old one. I had to let it go." "I'm glad you did," I said. "I'm glad you both did. You taught me a very important lesson. You taught me that it's never too late to ask for forgiveness, and it's never too late to give it. You taught me that pride is the most dangerous thing a man can possess because it isolates him from the people who love him the most. You taught me something too," David said. "You taught me that you can lose everything and still find your way back. You taught me that a man is not defined by his failures, but by how he responds to them. You taught me how to be a father, a husband, a man who is not afraid to be vulnerable." His words hit me with a powerful sense of emotion. I had always thought that my legacy to my son was my business, my hard work, my self-made success. But it wasn't. It was my failure. It was the mess I had made that had forced him to grow, to become a better man, a man who would never make the same mistakes I had. The conversation that night was a testament to how far we had come. We were no longer two men talking about a difficult past. We were two men talking about a shared present, a shared future, and the profound lessons we had learned from our shared journey. A few months later, Emily came home with a small, knowing smile on her face. "David," she said, her voice filled with a quiet joy, "I have some news for you." David looked at her, his eyes widening. He looked at me and then he looked back at her. Are you pregnant?" he asked, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and excitement. She nodded, a single tear of joy rolling down her cheek. "We are." The news was a thunderclap of pure, unadulterated joy. David scooped her up in his arms and spun her around, his face filled with a happiness that was so pure and so profound it was impossible not to feel it. So I stood there watching them, my heart swelling with a gratitude that was almost unbearable. My son, the man who had been a boy in my arms, was now going to be a father himself, and in that moment, I knew. The cycle of our lives had come full circle. The lessons I had learned, the mistakes I had made, were now a part of his legacy. He would be a better father than I had been, because he had seen my failures, and he had learned from them. I walked over to them, my eyes welling up with tears. I hugged them both, a tight family embrace. This is the best news in the world, I said, my voice thick with emotion. David looked at me, his eyes shining. I know, Dad. I know. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about all of it. The wedding, the photos, the photo album, the trip to San Francisco, the house, the reconciliation. It had been a long and painful journey, a journey that had been filled with more fear and regret than I had ever thought possible. But it had all led to this moment, to this family, to this love. And as I drifted off to sleep, I felt a profound sense of peace. The ghosts of the past were gone, replaced by the warmth of a new life. And I knew that in the morning, I would wake up to the sun streaming through the window, the sound of my son and his wife laughing in the kitchen, and the promise of a future that was full of love, a future that was finally, truly whole. Months turned into a year. The house was a home, filled with the warmth of love and the laughter of a new life. Emily's baby bump grew, a beautiful, visible sign of the future. David was a different man, more confident, more relaxed, filled with a quiet joy that radiated from him. He was no longer the boy who had been hurt. He was a man who had healed, and in doing so, he had found his way to a new kind of happiness. I, too, had changed. I was no longer the proud, stubborn man who had once defined himself by his success. I was a man who had found a new purpose in life, a new identity, a new source of joy. I was a grandfather. The title felt like a weight, a heavy, wonderful weight of responsibility and love. One afternoon, a few weeks before Emily was due, David and I were in the backyard building a small swing set for the baby. We worked in comfortable silence, the tools a familiar rhythm between us. "You know, Dad," he said, "I was thinking about the wedding photos. My heart, which had long since healed, still felt a small, familiar twinge." "What about them?" I asked. "I realized something," he said. "Something I didn't see at the time. You weren't in the photos, but you were there. You were there, Dad. You were at the wedding. You were at the reception. You were there when I said my vows. You were there in my heart, even if you weren't in the frame." His words were a revelation. I had been so focused on my physical absence from the photos that I hadn't seen the most important truth. I was there. I was in the moments before the photos and the moments after. My presence was not defined by a snapshot. It was defined by a lifetime of love and a journey of reconciliation. "You're right, son," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You're right." He looked at me, a deep sense of understanding in his eyes. "And I'm so glad you're here now. I'm so glad we have this swing set, this house, this family." "Me too," I said, a tear rolling down my cheek. "Me too." A few weeks later, on a warm, sunny afternoon, Emily gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby boy. They named him Richard after me. I held him in my arms, a tiny, perfect bundle of life, and I felt a profound sense of closure. This was it. This was the end of one story and the beginning of another. The pain, the regret, the shame, it was all gone, replaced by the overwhelming, unconditional love of a grandfather for his grandson. My son had taken photos with every family member at his wedding, everyone except me. But he had given me something so much more valuable. He had given me a new life, a new purpose, and a new family. He had given me the chance to be in the photos that truly mattered, the unseen photos, the photos of a father and son, building a home, a life, and a family, one frame at a time. The photos of a man who had lost everything, but who had found his way back home. And in that moment, in that hospital room, holding my grandson, I knew that the story of my life was not a story of failure, but a story of redemption. It was a story of a father and a son, two men who had lost their way, but who had found their way back to each other. And it was a story that in the end had the happiest of endings,